Habitat loss is the greatest threat to biodiversity on the planet.
There's no question that our lifestyles, our cars, our need for more farmland, and our love of all kinds of plastic stuff are putting the hurt on ecosystems all over the world. Human activity all by itself, just people doing what they do, could be responsible for the extinction of nearly 1,000 plant and animal species to date, most of them over the last century.
Functioning ecosystems are important for various reasons.
The ecosystems of the world are working very hard for us every day, filtering water, sucking carbon dioxide out of the air, producing all the food we eat, all very important ecosystem services. Benefits that the natural world provides us for free. So having ecosystems and keeping them intact is important, not only for the organisms who live in them, but also for us, the animals who rely on them for thousands and thousands of things that we could never do for ourselves. And the less diverse those ecosystems are, the more vulnerable they become to disturbances.
Healthy ecosystems can better withstand and recover from a variety of disasters.
Even though it's one of those super resilient ecosystems, we're having serious impacts on it. How? Well, first by removing a lot of what makes a forest, trees. According to some estimates, we are clear-cutting around 8,000 hectares of trees a day to provide land to graze cattle on, and to harvest wood to make coffee tables or whatever.
So humans are causing habitat loss. Why do we do this? We cut down forests like this. Well, yeah, sure, we use the wood to make furniture and to build our houses. But I'll tell you, in places like India, there's not enough wood for any construction. They don't build things out of wood anymore. Wood is so valuable and hard to find. They're building their buildings out of brick.
That the world's wealthiest 16% of the people on Earth use 80% of the available resources.
So why is this bad?
Humans transform landscapes in dramatic ways. This is, on the left, is a version of Manhattan Island before we got there and started building these gorgeous buildings in downtown New York City. There's clearly a lot more biodiversity to the left of this than there is in downtown New York.
If a human is living in a given place, fewer native plants and animals can live there.
When you cut down a hectare of rainforest, suddenly a place where a few thousand species used to live turns into a place where just a handful of species live. Some grass, some weeds, maybe some rats or mice, some insects, and, some cows. Because man, we love cows. And when you take out so many of the living things on that hectare of land, a bunch of things happen. For starters, you're not just affecting that ecosystem, but neighboring ecosystems as well. For instance, all those trees that were cut down provided the service of regulating the flow of all that rain that rainforests get, not only by absorbing some of it, but also by slowing down runoff, letting the water seep into the soil before slowly making its way into streams and rivers and ultimately the ocean. But when those trees are gone, the water hits the land and shoots off into the nearest stream, causing erosion and washing minerals and chemicals all the way to the sea, where it affects marine ecosystems, and when I say affect, I don't mean in a good way.
So what are some of the consequences? Several harrowing examples of habitat destruction and loss comes from Lester Brown's book, Plan B 4.0. In Chapter 8, in the section where he discusses carbon sequestration, he states that if Brazil's Amazon rainforest continues to shrink, it may also continue to dry out, becoming vulnerable to fire. If the Amazon rainforest were to disappear, it would be replaced largely by desert and scrub forest land. The capacity for the rainforest to cycle water into the interior of the continent, including to the agricultural areas in the west and to the south, would be lost. At this point, a fast unfolding local environmental calamity would become a global economic disaster, and because the burning Amazon would release billions of tons of carbon into the atmosphere, it would become a global climate disaster. In the same chapter, Brown states that the Philippines, for example, has banned logging in most remaining old-growth and virgin forests, largely because the country has become so vulnerable to flooding, erosion, and landslides.
This double whammy is much of what's driving global warming. As a result, we're seeing decreases in the levels of polar sea ice, which means less habitat for polar bears, seals, and seabirds. More temperate animals are moving closer to the poles, and hotter, drier conditions are causing more grass fires and forest fires. And while the climate has changed many times in the past, those changes usually took place over centuries or even millennia, giving organisms time to adapt or move. These changes are taking place within our lifetimes, and it's kind of a huge deal.
Here are some examples. Habitat destruction, degradation, and fragmentation are significant threats to gopher tortoises. Aside from this, only about 3 to 5% of young gopher tortoises survive on average. This is because these tortoises leave their eggs at the entrance of the burrows in order to capture heat, making it very easy for predators to eat the eggs. Despite this, gopher tortoises are incredibly important. Their burrows provide shelter for more than 300 other species, including, but not limited to, snakes, frogs, toads, lizards, mice, foxes, skunks, opossums, rabbits, quail, armadillos, burrowing owls, and many others. Several of these species are legally protected due to their ecological importance, which makes these burrows even more ecologically valuable. Gopher tortoises also spread seeds of many plants in their droppings, which fills another important role in the ecosystem. This all shows that gopher tortoises are definitely a keystone species worth protecting. Florida panthers once roamed many southeastern states. Now they are reduced to a single population. Less than 200 panthers remain in the wild. Habitat destruction, degradation, and fragmentation are the greatest threats to panthers. Housing developments and highways are separating panthers and shrinking habitats. Florida panthers have no natural enemies except for other panthers and humans. However, the combined threats have been enough to land the animal on the endangered species list. But what are some solutions?
In our world of finite resources, it's a balancing act between humans and every other species on Earth. And we have to learn to do more with less to keep that natural balance, the natural species richness, the biodiversity that keeps ecosystems and therefore all of nature, including ourselves, healthy.
The best way to reduce habitat destruction is to inform others of the problem. Florida Gulf Coast University is doing just that by offering classes that teach students of these issues, as well as teaching ways to prevent and reverse them.
Protected areas are really important, but even in a place like Yellowstone, we can't keep all of human impacts out. And so even in a place like this park and other protected areas in the world, we have to be alert to the kind of global impacts that we're causing.
And now, hopefully you can see how one human impact can lead to another, and how, even indirectly, they can end up reducing biodiversity.